Welcome to Inside Economics. I'm Mark Zandy. Thanks for joining this week. We've got a real group here today. We're missing Chris. Chris Doreedy's the Deputy Chief Economist. He's on sabbatical, isn't he, Ryan? What's up with him? Where is he? Is he going to make it back for next week?
No, he'll be back next week. But have you noticed that our ratings have gone up substantially since Chris has been on vacation?
Oh, really? How do you know that?
No,
oh,
I'm
you're
kidding.
only kidding. I thought you had me going there for a second.
Yeah, I should have kept it going because he's probably going to listen to this on the plane.
Coming back from Italy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've missed him, but it'll be good to have him back next week. But we are in good shape. We've got a few of our colleagues joining us. In fact, this podcast is a little bit of an experiment because we've got a pretty full house here. In addition to Ryan, who's the director of real-time economics, who you all know quite well, we've got Jesse Rogers. Jesse Jesse's like a Renaissance man. He does like almost you speak like 10 languages, don't you?
Yeah, 3 or 4. Spanish, Portuguese, and a little bit of Arabic.
Is that why you said 3 or 4?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So depending, like, if you count the 3 words I know in Arabic. It's a family heirloom. We've lost it over the generations. My mom's a native speaker, but, just didn't get passed down.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that. What is her nationality? Where's she from?
She's American.
But she knows Arabic.
Grandparents, were from Syria.
Oh, from Syria. Oh, okay. Very cool. And you are critical to all the work we do in Latin America. In fact, we were thinking about buying a Brazilian company. Was it Brazilian? I think it was Brazilian.
Yeah.
And you actually, I remember I asked you to go down and run that business, and you said with some intrepidation, after some real deep thought, yep, you were ready to go. And then of course the deal didn't happen. So you were so bummed out because you were all set to go. Where was it exactly? I can't remember. Sao Paulo or
Sao Paulo, yeah. I think we do have an office there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be a bit of a different thing, though.
Yeah. So Jesse, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you find your way to Moody's Analytics?
Sure. My background's in public policy and journalism. I cut my teeth actually living in Mexico City and working at a small research institute and think tank there. I was there for 3 years. Came back for my master's, and I don't know, almost by accident, a recruiter kind of called me up towards the end and asked me one thing. He said, would you be prepared to move to Westchester? And thinking it was Westchester, New York, I said yes. So I kind of set the whole thing in motion.
Oh,
yeah. That was the first thing he asked me. So,
Westchester, PA is a lot nicer than Westchester. Well, I shouldn't say that,
I'm comfortable. I'm in Philadelphia now, but I miss going to the office.
Yeah. But how long have you been with us at Moody's Analytics now?
It's going to be 7 years.
Wow. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, and I should have said right up top that after we get through some of the numbers like we typically do, and we're going to play our game and everyone's going to play, we're going to talk about global supply chains. And so, Jesse, I think you're on board to chat about copper and other commodity prices. And of course, a lot of that's produced in Latin America. And so it all kind of fits. So you're ready to talk about copper?
Yeah, Dr. Copper. Looking forward to it.
The answer is yes. Yeah, you are ready.
Mark's favorite indicator.
Oh, I'm yeah.
It's my favorite indicator. We'll come back to that. Although I forgot to look at the price before I came on, but I'm sure Jesse knows the price.
4.3.
Okay, and we also have, what is it?
4.3. Kind of static.
$4.30 a pound. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Still very high. Okay. We also have Todd Metcalfe. Todd, how long have you been with us? Not 7 years. It's been more like
3.5.
I was going to say 3, 4. How about that? Yeah. Very good. And you are critical to all our housing analysis. In fact, we've been going back and forth recently on house price modeling at the metro area level, and we seem to be, getting that together. A lot of good work there. And you're here to chat about, because we are talking about global supply chains. Obviously, there's been a lot of disruption to supply chains for building materials. Lumber has been the kind of the poster child for supply chain issues. And so I know you've been watching that very carefully. So it's good to have you aboard. And did you come to us right from your PhD? And were you, because you got your PhD in Syracuse, you were just telling me.
Right.
Did you come to us directly?
No, I worked as an economist at Towson University. They have a little think tank that they do regional economics there, and so I worked there first. And then Evan Andrews was in the same PhD program as I was, and he's the one
colleagues.
Yeah, he's the one who got me into Moody's.
Yeah, you can't be too familiar on this podcast. Like, you're talking to me, but you're also talking to the world. So, you know, like, they're going, who the hell is Evan Andrews? Yeah. So just, you know, great guy, by the way. He's a great guy. But and so you went from Syracuse, got your PhD. Actually, Syracuse has a really good public policy.
Yes.
Is that where you were? You're in the public policy area?
So I was actually in a multidisciplinary program. So basically, I was an applied economist, but all of my professors or all of my committee members were actually public administration professors.
Yeah.
Generally, economists in the public administration program.
Yeah, really, really good group of folks there. Well, it's good to have you here. And then finally, Tim Way. Tim, he's our chip guy. He's been following the chip industry, you know, carefully for some time, and obviously, that's also a kind of a poster child for global supply chain issues. Has really messed up the vehicle industry, which has really been a real problem here. So good to have you here, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Good to be here.
Yeah, and you know, I like to tease Tim because he got his PhD in Minnesota, and when I was back at school, they were all about real business cycles. Did anything ever come out of that whole thought process around real business cycles? Do you think it's had an impact on people's thinking?
I think to some degree, yeah. I think it's influenced sort of a lot of the modern DSGE modeling that we see coming out of central banks and academic institutions nowadays. But to me, it's just, you know, it's yet another kind of sort of way to think about the world, right? And it's, I think, come into some kind of acceptance, right? I'm sure Todd will agree that Syracuse also teaches real business cycle theory at some point during its macro curriculum. So.
Well, you guys are both from schools that got it wrong. So what can I say?
Well, Penn also teaches RBC stuff, Mark. So
they do? You know, when did that happen?
They do. Oh yeah, they do. Absolutely. I mean, like, they've hired a lot of Minnesota guys. So you know, I mean, I think if you go back there, I think you'll see that RBC constitutes a huge chunk of their macro curriculum.
I'm only joking. As you know, Tim, I tease you all the time. I give you a lot of grief. Yeah, but you went from Minnesota to where you didn't come to us directly from Minnesota, did you?
No, that's right. No. So I've been through the ringer in some ways, you know, because I'm originally from Canada, but as you said, I went to school in Minnesota for my PhD. I went to Cambridge after that. I was a fellow at the University of Cambridge in the UK for 3 years, and I worked in consulting after Cambridge. So that's actually how I got to Moody's was through consulting.
Well, great to have you, and so you can see this is a little bit of a Brady Bunch thing going on here. We've got 5 of us, so this is a little bit different than what we've had previously on the podcast. So a little bit of an experiment, but it's good to do this experiment with you guys. So welcome aboard. And as the listener knows, we first, before we dive into the topic, which is going to be again global supply chains. We talk about the statistics and play a little bit of game here. So I'm going to just so that you get a sense of it. We're going to start with Ryan, and of course Ryan is a maven at this. You know, he's really, really good at this. So Ryan, what's your statistic for the week?
All right, it is minus 1.5%.
Minus 1.5%.
This is something on everyone's mind, and it has been one of the big contributors to fluctuations recently.
Fluctuations what?
Recently.
What'd you say?
Over the last few months.
Fluctuations in what? just
I'm not going to give it away.
Oh, that gives it away?
Yeah, that gives it away. It's like a
damn. I thought I got him. Oh yeah. Fluctuation. You guys have any idea what minus 1 point? And this is a statistic that came out this past week.
Tuesday. There's another hint.
Oh, geez.
8:30 a.m.
8:30. Everything comes out. Well, not everything comes out at 8:30 a.m. Well, CPI came out Tuesday morning, and minus 1.5%. Guys, do you see how I do this? This is called deductive reasoning, isn't it? Called deductive reasoning? Yeah, it's called deductive reasoning. Jesse would know, and it's probably the decline in used vehicle prices in the month.
I'm impressed. Very good.
Oh, baby! Ding, 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 ding. Hey, we need to get a bell on Inside Economics.
A bullhorn.
I can ring it. In fact, I need to get the bell.
Anyone
really,
talks, you can just ring the bell.
Yeah. I will have to say, though, I'm not sure I would have gotten it unless you told me Tuesday. I would have.
Yeah, because a lot of stuff came out this week. But
yeah,
used
a
car
lot
prices,
of stuff came out. Yeah.
Used car prices have been driving the CPI up high, like over the last few months. It's been adding a lot. And now it's subtracted in August.
Yeah. Well, tell us about the CPI report in general. I mean, I thought that was a pretty important report, but I'll let you kind of lead the way on that. So why don't you fill us in on that one?
Yeah, so August was like the first glimpse of inflationary pressures beginning to moderate. The CPI rose less than what the consensus anticipated. And if you strip out the volatile food and energy components, the CPI only rose 0.1% in August. And that's a lot weaker than what we've seen over the last several months. And a good chunk of that is because used car prices fell. A lot of the reopening components of the CPI, so used rental car prices, lodging away from home, they also moderated. Airfares, they plunged. That could be Delta as well in August. So we're getting a little relief on the inflation front.
Yeah, it feels like inflation has peaked. It's rolled over. I think overall CPI, consumer price index inflation, peaked in June. I think on a year-over-year basis, 5.5%. Still elevated, obviously, because of the base effects, but it feels like we're now, and given that 0.1% increase, very modest increase in core CPI, excluding food and energy, which is what economists generally look at to gauge where the inflation rate is headed in the near term, suggests that we've peaked on inflation. So the idea or the view that this spurt in inflation, this spike in inflation, is temporary or transitory, as the Federal Reserve might say, that looks right. That looks like what's happening here. Would you concur with that? Yeah,
I think
agree.
Yeah, next month. So for the September data, it could be a lot of noise in there because of some hurricane effects that drove up energy prices. But looking past the hurricane effects, I think inflation's definitely beginning to moderate.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So should I give you my statistic, or should we go on to the guys? Guys, do you have Jesse? Do you have an indicator, a statistic?
Yeah. Yes, I do, Mark.
You do? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You have a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah, I believe so.
Did Ryan give this to you, or did you come on this on your own?
This is mine. I may have workshopped it a little bit with Ryan, so maybe we should count him out for this round.
All right.
But Jesse's stressed about this, Mark.
I know he is. I can feel it. Look, his hands are folded across his
chest. I know.
He's really nervous about this.
He's sweating a little bit. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Don't disappoint Jesse.
Actually, I can see he can cleaned up his room. We're all on Zoom too, so
yeah.
I see you cleaned up your room there a little bit. I can tell he's ready. Okay, fire away, Jesse. What's the number? What's your statistic?
It's 15%, and one clue is it's year to date.
15%. On the nose. 15%, you said.
Yeah.
Roughly. Cumulative year to date. And this is a statistic that came out this week or relatively recently?
It's a weekly average. So it's a weekly average of
weekly average. Whoa, that
this is not the one you ran by me.
Yeah, this is a bit of a different one. I was thinking the other one I ran by Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ryan, do you have any, is it related to global supply chains in
It's gotta
some
be.
way? Or
Yes, it is.
it is. Is it a price? Are we
Yes,
looking
it
at
is a price.
Oh, it's a price. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, you see how I do this, guys? Deductive reasoning. It's a price, 15%. It's up 15% so far
Since the
this
start
year.
of this year. Yeah.
And it's a weekly average. And I'm guessing, given where you're coming from, it's a price for a commodity. Would that be fair?
Yes. Yeah, that is.
Okay.
Is it copper?
No, it
Copper.
can't be copper, can it?
Yeah.
It is copper?
So,
Oh,
here we
okay.
go.
Copper.
Copper prices. Okay.
We got them pinned.
I thought that would be too easy. That's why I said it can't be copper. That's like, yeah, okay. Copper prices up.
Chris only
Copper
talks about
prices.
housing. Jesse's only going to talk about copper.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you guys have typecast me already. I'm not on for 10 minutes and I'm typecasted.
Good point. Well, we do that on Inside Economics. We can figure you out pretty quickly, right away. But that was a good one. That was very good. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll come back to copper prices in just a few minutes. Sure. Okay. Let's go to Tim. Tim, do you have a statistic, Tim?
Yeah, I do. It's 75%.
75%. Okay. And don't tell me it's chip prices year to date.
Oh, it's not chip prices. That would be catastrophic.
Yeah, that would have been too easy. Okay, so all right, so it has to do with global supply chains.
Yes, it does. It also has to do with chips.
But it's not a price.
It's not a price.
Is it capacity utilization?
Getting there. Close. Yeah, close. Not quite. Yeah.
Hold it. 75% sounds low for capacity utilization.
Oh, I was gonna build on your train of deductive reasoning and start chipping away at industry specific.
Okay, but so it's
related to capacity utilization. Yes.
It's related to capacity,
but it's more geographic in nature.
Okay.
Industrial production.
Production, yes, but production where of what?
Oh, now we're getting.
Can I take a guess?
Now he's really.
Yeah,
really
we're very close. We're very close. Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I'd say probably Asia.
Yeah. So what is
on Asia? Do I have to tell you what the province it's in?
No, you're spot on, Mark. So it's 75% of global chip production is done in East Asia in particular.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good statistic. Yeah. Say that again. 75% of
global chip production.
And that's all chips. Basic chips, high tech, sophisticated chips, the whole shoot and match. That's
absolutely right. Yep. So basically 75% of total chip manufacturing around the world.
Okay, I got one for you. This is for Tim. What percent of global chip manufacturing is in Taiwan?
So for high-end chips?
No, I said total chips.
Total. So I would say in terms of fab production, it's 54% is done by TSMC alone. So that accounts for the vast majority. Taiwan has...
Now, who's that for the listener?
Yeah, so it's Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company.
Right.
It's the world's largest chip maker. But to dig a little bit deeper into that, in terms of high-end, right? Mark, you mentioned high-end chips. And these are the chips that go into phones, computers. 92% is done by TSMC. So done by Taiwan. And that's incredible.
That's impressive the number is impressive, but the way you kind of answered that, my challenge was impressive. I had no idea what the answer was, but you did. So very good. That's great.
I'm biased to knowing things about Taiwan. I'm glad that you think I'm doing a good job.
No, I thought Ryan, wasn't that impressive?
That was impressive.
Yeah, Todd's not impressed, but he never is impressed.
No.
Yeah.
I just don't really want to follow that, but it doesn't look like I have a choice.
Right. Okay. Hey, Tim, that was damn good. Very good. Todd, you're up. What's your statistic?
1076.6.
1076.6.
All right. Is this a price?
It's price related. So it is dollars.
Building materials?
It is building materials related.
The peak
Is
in
it
lumber prices?
Yeah, is lumber back up to 1,000? No, because that's below
No,
that
no, no.
now. Yeah,
It's closer to 500 right now.
yeah.
It
closer to
involves the peak in lumber prices.
Oh, the peak. Oh, so this isn't a recent price. This is a historical price.
It's both. It's a difference.
Oh, we're going with
Oh,
differences? Is it
it's the
Why not?
decline. I know what it is. I know
Yeah.
what it is. I know what it is. It is the decline in lumber prices from its peak to the current price.
You
To
see how Mark
yesterday's
does
close.
this? You see how Mark does this? I get him 95% of the way there, and then he jumps in.
That's not true. Is it? Is it really true? I mean, maybe it
Watch.
could be.
Yeah.
Okay. that may be true. Not intentional though. You see, I didn't know that I was doing that, but it's possible. It's possible I could be doing that.
Well, if we had that bell, we could settle it, ring it in as soon as the indicator gets in.
I'm sorry I even mentioned that because now Ryan's going to go get the bell and he's going to ring it when he wants to ring it.
Right.
I'm getting the bell. I'm getting the bell.
You can get the bell.
I'm getting the bell.
Yeah, bell, Ryan, you get a bullhorn.
Oh, that's right. Hey, well, that was good. That was good, Todd. That was a good one. Should I give you my statistic?
Yep.
Okay. And of course, it's kind of related to global supply chains, kind of, sort of. I don't want to lead you too far down that road, but it's a statistic that has come out this week. Actually, I'll say it came out very recently. And it goes to a reason for optimism about future economic growth. Ready? 1.25. 1.25. And Ryan,
This is a reason for optimism?
Yeah, reason for optimism about economic growth going forward. Yeah, indeed. But it highlights what's going on with global supply chains and why it has been a drag on economic growth. But this.
Are you going inventory to sales ratio?
You got it. Way to go, Ryan. That is right. That is the inventory to sales ratio. So you take all the inventories, that's the numerator. You take all the sales, and that's the denominator. And the ratio, it gives you a sense of, how lean inventories are. 1.25 is about as low as that has ever been. This is for the month of July. It was actually lower 1 month back in the very kind of the wake of the financial crisis when we had that big drawdown in inventory. We got to 1.24 for 1 month, but that quickly came back. So we're at 1.25. And interestingly enough, the Census Department, which is the source of the data, breaks that down lots of different ways, but manufacturing, retail, and for retailers, inventories and manufacturers, inventory to sales at retailers, inventory to sales at wholesalers. And the thing that is just incredible is the inventory to sales ratio at retailers. Mm-hmm. It has plunged since the pandemic. It was, kind of headed down over time. Just-in-time inventory management, that kind of thing, has been bringing that inventory to sale ratio down for retailers. And also, online use and increase in Amazon and warehousing, much more inventories have been going into warehousing. But that is really collapsed and, suggests, the reason for optimism here is because it's so low. As things start to kind of normalize and we kind of iron out the global supply chain issues, and we'll talk about that, businesses are going to have to ramp up production to rebuild inventory. Inventories are so low that we're going to get a real boost to economic growth, at least for 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 quarters, maybe all of 2022, because we're going to have to see those inventories rebuilt. Anything else to add on the inventory sales? I know you look at all these statistics, Ryan. So any other insight on the IS ratios or anything on inventories?
Yeah, so if you take all the data that came out this week, retail sales, the inflation numbers, the inventory data, our GDP model, our daily high-frequency GDP model ticked up from 3.9% at an annualized rate to 4.1. But to your point, inventories are...
Ryan, just to explain that, and I know you talk about it regularly on the podcast, but that's our tracking estimate for the third quarter, the current quarter GDP growth rate. So we take all these statistics that come out on a daily basis, we have a model, you have a model that you run to translate that into what does it mean for GDP growth, real GDP, the value of all the things that we produce in the current quarter. And you're saying, given the data we got this week, it went from expected growth rate tracking estimate of 3.9%, which is where we were last week, to 4.1 this week.
Correct.
Yeah.
But if you strip out inventories,
oh yeah,
barely growing.
No,
less
really?
than 1%. Inventory is going to be a big boost to that third quarter GDP.
And it's not like we're adding inventory, are we? Or is it just that we're not cutting inventory as much?
Exactly. We're not cutting as much.
Wow. Are we going to actually add to inventory in the quarter though, according to our modeling?
Not yet. The model doesn't have a positive. It just has less of a decline.
Less negative. Yeah, less
Correct.
negative. Yeah. Hey, how would you characterize, I've got my own view, but I'm curious in your perspective. How would you characterize the message from this week's raft of data, in the context of Delta and the clear negative impact that Delta virus and the wave of infections has had on economic growth? I mean, the economy feels like it's been dinged meaningfully, probably since late June, certainly in July, coming into August. But, how do you feel about the data this past week and what it says about how the economy is navigating the fallout from Delta?
I don't feel good about it.
Oh, really?
I mean, if you look at retail sales, they were strong in August, but there was massive downward revisions to July. So the decline in July retail sales is now a lot larger than we previously thought. So the spending data, when you net it all out, August and July, it's not great. If you look at all the alternative high frequency data that we have, and you and Dante, our colleague, and Matt, in that CNN back to normal index, that's rolled over. So I'm just not feeling good.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, because my take was, I've been nervous about Delta, and it has lowered our forecast for growth in the current quarter, Q3, and for the year. I mean, if you look at our forecast for real GDP for calendar year 2021, we had been, if you go back 2 or 3 months ago, almost to 7% for the year. We're now back down to about 6. Not all of that is Delta, but I'd say at least half a point of the downward revision in our growth expectations for this year is because of the effect of Delta. But it felt like this week, the data, just everything kind of felt a little bit better to me. I mean, retail sales were surprisingly strong. Yeah, they downward revisions for July, but it was still, if
it rose, so it was good.
Yeah. And, just small things like, the Philly Fed index, right? Which maybe many people don't follow. This is an index constructed by the Philadelphia Federal Reserve of manufacturing activity in Philly. And this index has been around since the beginning of time because, Fed's been doing this, constructing this for a long time. It actually rose. And that's in the month of August from July. What else? Consumer sentiment seems to have stabilized a little bit.
Yeah, but it's still really depressed.
Yeah.
It's down where we were during the teeth of the pandemic. What's interesting is if you look at the measures of business confidence, so the NFIB survey, the regional Fed manufacturing surveys, their general business conditions index is actually like a question about confidence. And our weekly business confidence survey, they're all holding up fine. It's the consumer measures that have just gotten crushed by the Delta variant.
Okay. So you came out of this week feeling no better about the impact of Delta than you did last week.
No, I'm feeling a little bit more concerned because
a little more nervous.
The number of schools that are closing or going back to virtual learning increased relative to last week, and it's now 1,000 schools across 35 states, and that's going to be problematic for labor supply over the next couple of months.
Say that again. How many schools?
1,000 over 35 states. So it's spread out. It's not regionally concentrated.
That have gone back to online learning?
Correct.
Because of the infections.
Delta variant. Yep.
Wow. Okay. All right.
So we're going to likely see that effect in the September employment numbers.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I was actually feeling a little bit better. Now I'm not so sure. You're right about our back to normal index. That index is, takes all of these statistics and brings it together into back to normal. What percent of normal? What percent of what we were prior to the pandemic in terms of economic activity? And that's now back down below 90%. So it says we're, had gotten as high as almost 94, 95 before Delta. We were 94% of normal, 94% of pre-pandemic, but now we're back down to 90. So, okay.
And I guess one last thing I'd say on Delta is, I guess my pessimism is being driven more by the alternative high frequency data, the daily, open table or seated dinners through open table, number of people passing through TSA checkpoints. That's capturing what's going on right now. The data that came out this week was showing what happened in August. So I think the September data, when it starts to roll in, will be on the softer side.
Okay. All right.
So I think we're looking at two different snapshots. I'm looking at today, and you're looking at the weekly data or the monthly data for August.
Yeah, good point. And I guess the other reason I was a little more upbeat, and I guess, curious what you think here too, is it does feel like the virus is that the Delta wave is kind of rolling over, that there's fewer infections. People are masking up more, and there's more vaccinations. And of course, more people are getting sick and developing immunity. So it feels like that wave is starting to abate, which we had been anticipating now, but that would be some reason for optimism. No,
I agree with you. Yeah, the 7-day moving average in daily confirmed cases is dropping, but it's still elevated. It's still above 100,000 per day. So this too will end, just like past waves. But I just think the economic costs of the Delta wave are going to be a little bit more than what we had previously anticipated.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we're anticipating it, right? Because we do have stronger growth in the fourth quarter of this year, in significant part to the expectation that this wave will abate over the next few weeks, certainly over the next couple of months.
Yeah, I'm confident that I think your baseline forecast is spot on. You get a big pickup in growth final 3 months of this year. I'm just worried about in the next few weeks.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll certainly be talking about this next week on the podcast as well. So, okay, let's turn to global supply chains. It's certainly an issue that's come to the fore again as the Delta virus has re-intensified and caused. And by the way, this is not just a U.S. phenomenon. This is a global phenomenon. We've seen Delta create havoc everywhere, and it's already scrambled global supply chains to a significant degree. And the supply chain issues is a really important one from a macroeconomic perspective and just a parochial personal perspective. Feels like you can't get anything these days without having to wait for it. My son ordered a couch for his new apartment probably 2 months ago. It arrived yesterday. So, not easy to get stuff. And part of that is just the surge in demand. Demand has been very strong, certainly throughout the pandemic for goods, for things that travel through the global supply chains. But, the chains have been severely disrupted by the pandemic. People getting sick and Malaysian chip plants closed, to messing with ports. We saw the Chinese have to shut down various terminals in various major ports because of the discovery of COVID, obviously a corollary to the global supply chain issues or the labor supply issues, because people are sick or taking care of sick people or fearful of getting sick. They haven't been going to work, and that exacerbates the global supply chain issues. And all of this has, come together and is now creating, very significant disruptors. So far, most of the economic damage has been around prices. Inflation has spiked. So we've seen prices jump for almost everything. All kinds of products have jumped because of the supply chain issues. But it also seems to be, and here's where it gets a little more worrisome, demand destruction, right? You can see this, it feels like it's happening to some degree in the vehicle industry, right? Because the chip plants closed, vehicle manufacturers who need all those chips can't produce as many vehicles, so they can't sell as many vehicles, and they probably will lose those sales, to some degree. There's going to be some pent-up demand. We'll get some of those back. We might not get all those back. So I don't think that's happening in a lot of industries yet, but certainly, something to watch. Certainly another concern. That's how I would frame the discussion around this. And so the conversation I'd like to have is, we're going to dig deep into different parts of the supply chain issues, try to understand, what exactly is causing these problems, what will it take to solve them, and when do we think they will be solved? Or, that's a tough one to answer. No one knows for sure, because a lot depends on the pandemic and how it's going to play out. But, in our baseline outlook and our forecast for the economy, where we think it's headed, what are we assuming about this? Does that sound like a reasonable conversation, guys?
Sounds good.
Sounds
Yes.
good.
On
Okay.
board.
You're
Yeah,
on
sounds
board?
good.
Okay. Well, who wants to go first? No, I'm not even going to ask. I'm going to pick. I'm going to pick Tim, because unless you're on Zoom, or unless you're on YouTube watching this, we're Zooming this thing. Tim looks like Superman. He's got a bright blue. What would you call that? It almost looks like it's not even a shirt. It looks like he's going to go scuba diving or something. I don't know.
It's
Right?
a sweatshirt. It's a sweatshirt.
Is it a
I don't want
sweatshirt?
to sound
Okay.
like I'm naked, Mark. Like, it's a regular sweatshirt.
No, it's not a regular. That's not a regular sweatshirt. Are you guys agree with me? There's something going on with that sweatshirt.
Don't sweatshirts have to have hoods?
No, not in my neighborhood.
Not in Canada.
Okay. They've got the park.
Tim has a secret life that he's hiding from us. Yeah. As soon as we wrap,
There's definitely an S somewhere over there.
Yeah, I'm moonlighting as Superman when I'm not working at Moody's.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's begin with you, Tim, and what's going on in the chip industry. Give us a little bit of history. How did we get into this mess that we're in the chip industry? The global chip industry.
So actually, Mark, what you and Ryan were just talking about, I think in terms of Delta is particularly pertinent to the chip industry. Because I think before the Delta variant sort of really came to the fore, I think, we were sort of this mindset where, the chip industry they were hampered in the sense that there was a shortage because of the pandemic, because demand just surged, while supply is relatively constrained, right? So I think a bit of background, taking a step back. I mean, chips, there are many different types of chips. So there's you alluded to high-end chips earlier, Mark. So these are sort of 7 nanometer or less type chips. These are the chips that are used in phones. So those types of chips, basically, you only need a handful of them, right, to make some of the major electronic gadgets that you see. Phones, gaming consoles, laptop computers, versus some of the more mature chips, right? So these are the chips that are using cars, sort of much older technology, 15 years or older. You need a lot more of these chips, thousands of them to make a single car, right? So early on in the pandemic, I think, what we saw was, we saw severe sort of shortage for the car industry, but maybe not so much for sort of some of the more high-end chips. And that's in part because, there's a lot more incentive for chip makers to make these high-end chips. Margins for those chips are a lot higher. So to give you another statistic, so nearly 50%, 49% of TSMC's revenues come from phones alone, right? So making chips for phones alone. So that's nearly half versus only 4% from automakers, right? So clearly there's a huge, and then, another 30% comes from advanced computing. So that's cloud computing, artificial intelligence, all these sort of high-end chips, right? So the high-end chips basically make up about 80% of their revenue book, which makes sense, right? Given that, these are really advanced technologies, very few manufacturers are able to produce them. And so, they have, pretty strong monopoly power over these chips. So now fast forward to the Delta variant and what it's doing to Asia, which is where I started off my spiel. So 75% of global chip production is done in Asia, and Asia unfortunately is bearing the brunt of, or at least sort of really experiencing some of its record highs in terms of COVID-19 cases because of the Delta variant, in particular affecting Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Thailand, as well as Vietnam. So these are 5 big countries that are to some degree involved in chip production, whether it's in assembly or integration or testing. So these are all essential in getting chips out the door. To the point where even Toyota, so Toyota is kind of like the poster child basically for car makers in terms of supply chain management. They've always done a very good job of that because they have a long history of creating, speaking of inventories, you mentioned that earlier as well. They have sufficient buffer inventory, and they have a very well-known tracking system where they basically have an online real-time tracking system that sort of looks at over 6,800 parts, what the lead times are and how much inventory they have, so that they can manage all those changes. And even Toyota has had to curtail production significantly. They've just raised it to 400,000 less vehicles this month because of these disruptions that are going on in specific plant closures in Asia that we hadn't really seen before the Delta variant. So I think, what? Please go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tim. Finish up.
I was just going to end by saying, I think in terms of high level, right, I think what Delta has really done is it's sort of exacerbated a lot of the existing shortages that are already out there, right, by creating yet another sort of, it's almost like a natural disaster of sorts, right? So the chip industry, they're always affected by natural disasters. They're affected by earthquakes. They're affected by droughts. These are very significant. If there's a drought in Taiwan, the whole world suffers because Taiwan basically produces a vast amount, right? More than half of basically all chips that are manufactured. But Delta basically is something that, even TSMC can't plan for, right? So TSMC has business continuity plans that account for droughts, that account for earthquakes. What does it do, right? But it can't
bring up droughts. Can I say, just so, because people don't know, I mean, producing chips is pretty water intensive, right? I mean,
very much so.
So you have a drought, you don't have water, you can't produce, basically.
You can't produce at all. Yeah, you can't produce at all. But they kind of, I think with droughts and earthquakes to some degree, you can kind of plan around that, right? So Toyota's planned around earthquakes. That's actually the genesis of their sort of world-class tracking system, was because they had this 2011 Fukushima earthquake that devastated them. And so since then, they've basically tried to keep a very tight hold on how much inventory they have for every single individual part that goes into their car models. But even they can't plan around, factory closures in Thailand and Vietnam, right? That's just sort of like a natural disaster almost. That's unforeseen.
So just to summarize, we saw a surge in demand because everyone's at home and they're not traveling, going to restaurants, so they're buying stuff and all that stuff. And of course, remote work, that means you're buying computers and telecommunications equipment and Game Boys and just all kinds of things. And every single thing these days has a chip in it of one form or another, of course, vehicles as well. And so that drove up demand. And then you have, it sounds like what you're saying is the chip industry on the supply side already was pretty fragile, kind of vulnerable to anything that could go wrong. Fukushima, nuclear meltdown in Japan, to Taiwanese droughts, to whatever. And now you throw in Delta, particularly Delta, because this is the first time that Southeast Asia got crushed, and there's a lot of chip production. I keep coming back to Malaysia because there you have plants that actually have closed because everyone's sick. They literally are sick and can't work. And so the confluence of all that is this very severe shortage of chips and the spiking prices. That's it. That's what's going on.
That's absolutely right. I think the only thing I will add to that, Mark, is that I think, the listener may appreciate how difficult it is for new production to come online. I think, typical lead times for existing capacity, right? So this is machines that are already in place, production lines that are already in place. Typical lead times right now are in excess of 26 weeks. That's half a year, right? And that's basically
that's not, is that 26 weeks not to build a new fab chip plant?
No. So this is for existing fabs, right? So for existing fabs, existing production lines, right? Just to get one chip from the manufacturer out the door to the end user. It's taking it's over 6 months, right? That is remarkable. And so if you want to build new plants or fabs, as they call it, So TSMC has been working on this for a while in Arizona, and that fab isn't going to come online until 2024, right? Samsung has the same plans to create new fabs in the southern U.S. They've filed papers with Texas and with a couple other states, and that their plant's not going to come online until 2023. So it's just near impossible, right, to create instantaneous supply, right? The only thing you can do is try to basically, talking about Ryan's point earlier about capacity utilization, right, to basically ramp that up to 100 and over if you can, right, and basically work overtime to make up for what you currently have and what's currently missing. The other issue with that is that you can't really repurpose these chips, right? So I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier in terms of there's a big distinction between high-end and low-end chips. And that's not a superficial distinction. I mean, that's really, you have very specific machines, right? So I wrote a paper earlier this year, that kind of delved a little bit deeper into Global Foundries, one of the actual US manufacturers of chips, and kind of what they do in their plants, right? So they have basically specific lithographic machines that can sort of essentially laser into silicon wafers, these specific chip designs, right? So you can't just anyhow, switch from one chip design to the other, just because the auto industry needs it more, and maybe, you're getting less demand from the gaming console makers. You can't just switch it over to auto. It doesn't quite work that way. So the supply constraints are real, right? These are actual tangible supply constraints, and they're only going to be made worse if the factories close down.
Okay. One thing you did not mention as a cause is the U.S.-Chinese tensions and the fallout from that. Huawei, has that played any kind of role here in terms of what's going on?
Oh, absolutely. It's played a very big role. So Huawei is kind of more historical in nature, I would say. But I think some of the things that happened after that, a lot of companies have basically adopted the same strategy. So taking a step back, right? So what happened sort of earlier on in the Trump administration, as they were basically imposing this boycott, not allowing essentially Chinese companies to buy from the U.S. And of course, there was a lot of bickering back and forth and sort of reciprocity in that manner. What a lot of the Chinese telecom and electronic companies did was they actually stockpiled a lot of chips, right? So they knew that this was coming, right? There was clearly a lot of discussion around it. It took months, as is always the case with government, for it to pass. And so they actually stockpiled a lot of chips. And what a lot of companies are doing now, and this is something that Toyota's always done in the past, is that they've always just had huge buffer inventory. But what a lot of companies are doing now is they're basically stockpiling chips as much as they can, right? And it's not just automakers. It's a lot of, you mentioned gaming consoles earlier. I don't know about Game Boys anymore, Mark, but PlayStation 5.
Sorry about that. That's my son. My son was a Game Boy. Yeah. Is there such a thing left? Are there any more Game Boys?
Yeah. So the counterpart nowadays is PlayStation 5s, right? So these are kind of, I'm not that young. Yeah. But I mean, those are really in high demand.
Oh, right? That's why he's got the blue sweatshirt. That's his gaming shirt. He's like, he's going to come on. He's going to go on to PlayStation 5, and he's like, he's a gamer. That's what's going. He looks like a gamer.
Mark, I need to make some YouTube income, because I'm clearly not getting paid enough at Moody, so I gotta make myself presentable. I'm just kidding. No, but I think. With PlayStation 5, right? So it's the same thing. So they basically had so much demand, far more, in fact, than they had forecasted, which kind of brings to light the importance of the work that we do. And so they've had several months, basically, where they had demand where we're not, it was just not getting met because they just had no chips. So what they've done is they've more than doubled their normal order, right? So this is basically what people are doing in anticipation, right, of what these geopolitical tensions can do. So I think the U.S.-China tensions, they still matter, particularly for Taiwan, right? I mean, because that's such a huge, it's such a huge kind of manufacturing hub. But yeah, I would say that it's more maybe sort of what happened after, and the lessons that we learned from that.
There's it's classic human behavior around hoarding, right? As soon as there's a whiff that you're going to have trouble getting something, people hoard, and then you have a problem. Like I can remember, at a Moody's conference, everyone's getting breakfast and someone says, "Oh, I think we're running out of coffee." Then of course everyone starts pouring all the coffee. We run out of coffee, very, rapidly. It was like a run on coffee. So I'm sure this sounds like what's happening in
Like the toilet paper shortage during the pandemic.
Toilet paper. And by the way, I am fully stocked. My wife is like all over that. There's never going to be, if you got anybody wants, of course I might charge you a price for it, but I've got toilet paper. Hey, so two quick things, Tim. First, what was the first thing? First thing is, so how is this going to get resolved? Are we seeing any progress here in resolving these supply chain issues? I mean, generally things happen on the demand side. You see higher prices, so people kind of adjust and try to, switch to something else. Although you just articulated that's not so easy in the chip industry. You see more investment. People, existing plants figure out new ways to go from 26 weeks, let's say, to 21 weeks to kind of speed things up. Are you observing any of that happening? Is that happening?
Both. Yeah, you're right on. So I think in terms of prices, right? So TSMC is going to raise prices by as much as 20% for some of its some of its chips. Actually, more on the lower end of things because those have traditionally been cheaper. And you're also seeing like China, in fact, like basically fined 3 of its chip makers almost $500,000 for what it's called abnormal price practices. Basically trying to keep these prices low, artificially low. And also, I think we're going to see a lot of pass-through, right? I think we're going to see, laptop prices go up. We've already seen vehicle prices go up significantly. Average vehicle prices in August were up $80 to $100, which is crazy, from a couple of years ago. So I think the price mechanism is certainly at work. I think in terms of inventories and in terms of adjustments, a lot of companies have been doing that. Tesla, in fact, is famous for trying to cut out the middleman. So what they've tried to do is they've tried to have sort of a more direct relationship with the actual chip makers. This is very difficult, obviously, because a lot of production processes are kind of you kind of inherit them, right? So you kind of already know, oh, this car part I'm going to get from this guy, this electronic unit I'm going to get from this other guy, and they're trying to do they're trying to cut that out so that they have more direct access, but that's not something that all consumers and suppliers can do, right? So there's some movement to try to make it more efficient. But I think in the short run, it's going to be very difficult to kind of really get around it. I think the hope really is that the delta gets more controlled. And we're seeing that in some of these places, right? So Japan, I think numbers are coming down. In fact, even Malaysia has now come down from all-time highs. So we are seeing some progress there, and obviously if that works out, then we'll be closer back to normal.
Okay. Well, we could have had a podcast just on the chip industry. I feel like I haven't really been able to ask all my questions. But I do want to save your forecast though, because I know as I said, I'd like to know what in terms of timing, when you think some of these things will start to iron themselves out to a point where it's not disruptive to the economy, to the vehicle industry or any other industry. But we'll come back to that, at the end. Okay, so let's pivot, and we have a choice. We can either go with Jesse and talk about copper commodity prices, or we can go with Todd and lumber and building material prices. Anybody want to go first, or should I pick?
Your podcast.
My podcast. Actually, Ryan, what do you think?
Let's go with Todd.
Todd. Okay, Todd. So Todd,
everyone's always talking about lumber prices. So
I know, and actually that could be a good case study here for the future of how this is all going to play out. So I don't know, Todd. I mean, it seems to me we do a lot of work with folks in the housing, multifamily, commercial real estate industries, and whomever I talk to, they're talking about shortages of something else that matters to them. Like, for example, I was at a function in Southern California, and I was talking to this multifamily developer, very successful developer, mostly in the West in California. And he was telling me, and he builds a lot of affordable rental, multifamily, which is obviously incredibly short supply. Rents are screamingly higher, across the country, particularly for affordable rental, out of necessity. And he was telling, and he does a lot of so-called LIHTC, rental. This is a LIHTC is a low-income housing tax credit, that is a subsidy to get builders to build more housing for lower income households at lower rent points. And he was telling me he's got projects, but he can't actually, and he won't actually begin them because he doesn't know when he's going to get the delivery of appliances. So, toaster ovens, I guess, I don't know, dishwashers.
That's Tim's issue again, because a lot of them are chips.
Oh, chips, right. It all goes back to Tim, damn Tim.
Because, my oven now is smart. So
yeah, there you go.
So yeah, and that's part of the issue. But then not only are there the chip issues with that part, there's also the fact that all the ships are stuck in port waiting to get unloaded because of the backup in kind of the global supply chains overall. So that's part of it. It's kind of been a rolling calamity of what is going to be in shortage for the house building industry. And that's actually where it's a little hard to say in some regards what was the impact of lumber, because I would actually argue that I'm going to spoil the punchline already. From a lumber standpoint, things have kind of, I don't want to say they've come completely to normal, because we're still I think up 61.6%. I have that statistic handily nearby from Good 2 point. Years ago, price-wise, from 9/16/2019. So lumber prices are still elevated to where they were 2 years ago, but they're actually down from where they were last year. And as I mentioned, with that 1,000 $76 at the beginning with my stat, we're actually down almost 65% from the peak in May. So lumber prices have definitely come down pretty drastically. The appliances have always been an issue and still are an issue. That's kind of similar to the couch and furnishing. Of course, that's not really the home builder's issue. That's the home buyer's issues. But yeah, that's still very much there. And from the end, yeah.
I was going to say, so going back, I guess, well, let's pick on lumber a little bit, because that seemed to be the first kind of major product that, at least in my mind, it came to the fore with regard to global supply chain issues. It was well over a year ago when we started to see lumber shortages. And as you say, things seem to be kind of normalized. They're not normal. We're not back to normal. We got a ways to go there, but they have been normalizing. So if you go back to the beginning, when the supply issues began to manifest, that too was in part increase in demand, right? The housing market navigated the pandemic incredibly well for lots of different reasons we've talked about on previous podcasts. Obviously, record low mortgage rates being first among the reasons why. But we saw this surge in demand,
and shift in preferences.
Shift in preferences, because people, weren't traveling, so they, said and they wanted to get out of the big cities where they were renting and out into the suburbs. So we saw a lot of home improvement because people were sitting on their back decks like me and, investing in their back deck in their homes. And then on the supply side of the market, explain what happened there. Why wasn't the industry able to kind of ramp things up to meet that increase in demand?
So of course the industry at first really expected that that demand was going to just fall out, and so the industry actually shut down, and they weren't really producing the lumber that was needed. And only.
So you say they were looking at our forecast. Our forecast was saying this industry is going to have housing is going to have a lot of problems. So they shut down and say, oh, Moody's is saying, hey, this is going to be a problem. That actually, isn't that your forecast, Todd?
For the record, that was right when I got transferred, and so I'm just gonna say that was more of your forecast.
It's still your forecast.
It was Todd's forecast. Jeez Louise. So you're saying your bum forecast caused the entire housing industry, lumber industry to kind of shut down, turn off all the lights, and all of a sudden they go, oh my gosh, there's like people are knocking on our door saying, where's the lumber? Is that what you're saying?
It's all my fault.
Oh, I knew.
So yes, the lumber industry basically, I mean, they had the shutdowns. Like everyone, when the economy shut down, everyone thought that the sky was falling and everything went down. And so no one really knew what to expect. I don't think you would have said in February of 2020 that would have been the case. Yeah. And so basically they shut down production. And actually overall in the end, production was actually up in 2020 for lumber for the entire year compared to 2019.
To be specific, when you say lumber, you mean sawmills, right? We're talking about sawmills here.
So timber is you grow a tree and that goes to the sawmill. Timber's been flat. Sawmills are the bottleneck. And so sawmills are where all of the money is being made. And so the sawmills had a great year last year. But the home builders, not so much. Well, the home builders had a good year too.
Well, let's fast forward. Okay, so now we have these severe shortages. What happened? So how is it that things are getting resolved? So what's the dynamics in the market that caused things to start normalizing?
So one, after kind of realizing their error and prices started increasing, lumber mills did basically start going as full out capacity wise as they could. There were some things that kind of slowed them down. Generally, they're rural. Some of them had problems finding labor, kind of the common issue. But they were basically running at as full capacity as they could, as quickly as they could, and have been more or less running at full capacity since. In Canada, just in the last month, some of the sawmills have actually started running below full capacity.
Oh, is that right? Oh, really?
Yeah, in at least British Columbia, their break-even point is higher than the American break-even point. So some sawmills in British Columbia have actually, I don't want to say idled production, but they've lowered production.
Got it. I guess the U.S. tariffs on Canadian lumber might be one reason for that. I think that's break-even price points higher.
I think that's part of it. It's also just with Canada, the different provinces have different like fee structures for cutting.
Right.
Because basically the whole tariff thing is that in Canada, most of the land where the trees are cut is owned by the government, whereas in the United States, most of it's owned by private companies or is privately owned. And so the argument is that the Canadian suppliers are overly subsidized by the government. And I think it just depends on what province you're in as to kind of what those prices look like.
Okay. So the sawmills kind of turned back the lights on, a little bit of delay because of labor supply and other issues, but they kind of ironed that out. So now they're producing flat out. I guess demand is moderated a little bit too in response to the higher prices. So you've seen people kind of balk at, building their back deck out another 5 yards because it's incredibly expensive to do. Home builders have actually kind of pulled it in a little bit too, because of the high lumber and other building material costs. So there's been a demand side response, a supply side response. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the other aspect of this, which is interesting and has played out in other markets as well, there's some speculation going on here too, right? I mean, lumber is in a sense, a financial market. And because there was all these shortages, you saw people kind of speculate in lumber, and that drove up the price. And of course, once it became clear that the supply demand dynamics were shifting in the other direction, all that speculative demand has gotten wrung out, and that's caused prices to come in. Is that a fair characterization of what's going on, or did I get that wrong?
I have seen the speculation. It's hard to tease that out versus like there was hoarding, because a lot of home builders are, if you can buy it, you just say yes, I want it. Partly because there were delays in even getting it, getting lumber, and so there was some hoarding, I think, going on in the industry also. And I think it's kind of hard to tease out exactly what that is.
I'm making a bit different point. There might be some hoarding. That's like you're saying physical hoarding, right? Physical hoarding of. I'm asking about the financial, kind of financial. Ryan, you're shaking your head up and down.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I think there was definitely some speculation. I mean, we could do some work around it, but to tease out the exact effect. But I think there was some clear evidence of speculation.
And that's one of the reasons why prices rose so sharply. We kind of went parabolic there for a while, and that's why they've come crashing back down. That's just, to be frank,
there
I
are
haven't looked at it
absolutely
carefully,
anecdotes about that. There are absolutely anecdotes about that, but I haven't seen kind of any smoking guns as exactly how much.
Well, there never is. There never is with investors. They're not going to leave a smoking gun, my friend. You got to piece it all together. Yeah. Okay. And so tell me, pre-pandemic, what was the kind of the benchmark lumber price?
Probably it would be roughly, I guess, the high 300s, roughly 400.
400. What? And what is that for? What's the unit?
I believe it is board feet.
1,000 feet.
1,000 board feet.
And then 1,000 board feet. And then what was the peak?
The peak was 1,670.5.
Okay. When was that? Roughly speaking, when was that? That
was May 7th of this year.
May 7th. And what are today on price?
We closed yesterday at 509, basically 594.
Okay, so we're within spitting distance of pre-pandemic. We're not quite there yet, but we're spitting distance. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, well, we're still up. I mean, about 60% from 2 years ago, because it was like 367 2 years ago.
Okay. Yeah. It feels like we're in spitting distance, but you're saying it's still pretty high. Yeah.
And that 590 is a little bit misleading because we had contract expiration yesterday, so we shifted from the September contract to November. So you'll look at late September when we're still in that September contract. We're closer to, we're below 500.
We're below 500. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll get back down there.
We'll get back down there. So is that arc of pricing and the dynamic that generates that arc playing out across all building materials, appliances, or not?
So no. Basically, the new kind of issues is so I think steel is up year to date 80%. Building, paper, and
so just for the listener, Todd's looking over at his screen because he knows that I want precision down to the third significant digit. But don't worry about that, Todd. Broadly speaking,
So I mean, basically, NAHB has really laid out just
National
that
Association of Home Builders. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Sorry. That basically everything is up for their expenses. Asphalt, public water, plastic pipe for water, fertilizer for the lawns, veneer. So the other wood products are up, and actually they've been a little more sticky. So the plywood, they're all related to that upper lumber price, but some of the hardwoods and other things, they still have some of their own dynamics. They kind of move together, but they will kind of be
they're idiosyncratic.
a little, yeah. Now the other thing is
okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say is that even with the lumber prices going down so much, the contractors aren't paying that futures price. They're still paying a higher price than what we're saying, because on the way down, the prices are sticky, because the wholesalers don't want to sell at a loss, and so they hold it back a little bit more. And so there's still some elevated prices even for most home builders. Plus when you buy it versus when you have it today.
So the dynamics that are in play in the lumber industry are playing out in other building materials, but in varying degrees depends on the material.
Yeah, well, and I mean, the other thing is I would say that you're not getting the same spikes. I mean,
Yeah.
steel is one where obviously that just industry wide, the home building or home building or multifamily, probably more for steel. They're a small part because industry wide or worldwide, we use a lot of steel for other things like cars and whatnot. So
yeah. Right. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to come back to your forecast on. We're going to use lumber as the benchmark. When are we going to normalize?
Mark, before we go on, I have a policy question for you. Why don't you think that for you?
For me, Mark?
Yes, Mark Zandy.
Okay.
Any other Marks here? I mean,
no, I thought maybe Todd. Go ahead, fire away. I'm good at policy
Todd can chime in
questions.
too, but I was curious, why didn't the Biden administration end the tariff on Canadian softwood lumber?
Well, there was a lot of pressure on them to do that, right? I just think that that has all other kinds of storylines and complications and political fallout, and I don't know. It's a pretty complicated mess. So you might have created more havoc than it was worth, And at the end of the day, the market seems to have adjusted pretty quickly, even without the tariffs. I mean, I'm no fan of the tariffs. I would have gone there immediately, but given all the political issues involved, I'm sure, and many things that I don't understand, and none of us may understand, because there's a lot of other dynamics here. They didn't do it, but that's a good question. Good question.
So let me have a crack at it if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Fire away.
So my alternate stat for today was going to be 18.32%. And that's actually the recommended tariff from the Department of Commerce for what the lumber price should go to on Canadian lumber. It's currently at 8.99%, which was lowered by the Trump administration at the beginning of the year from 20.2%, which had been what they did and what the Trump administration put on in 2017. So the lumber trade issue has been going on since Reagan. There's been five major lumber deals. The last one I think ended, I want to say 2015. And then there was like a grace period of like a year where it kind of stuck. There's kind of broader trade negotiation issues, I think, probably also at stake here, where it's probably preferable to have a broader trade agreement on this than to just kind of keep fighting it up or down.
Yep, that sounds right to me. There's a lot of moving parts here. Okay, so I think we need to move on. The podcast is getting a little long in the tooth here. And Jesse, you probably should have volunteered to go after Tim, but so you're going to get a little short shrifted here.
All right.
Sorry about that. I apologize.
That's okay.
But
I'll be brief.
It's actually, well past lunchtime. So here in the East Coast. So, we're going to have to move a little long here. And I still have to get forecasts from you guys on, how this is all going to play out. So copper, what's going on in the copper market? As Ryan noted early on, that's been one of my favorite statistics for gauging the strength of the global economy and, the potential for inflationary pressure is developing. What's going on in the copper market? Why? And provide a little context. Where's copper prices typically? Where is it now? What does it mean? And why are we here?
All right. Well, I kind of elbowed my way on here because we don't really have a shortage in global copper markets right now. But I do have. Yeah, I just kind of pushed my way in.
On this podcast. Oh my gosh!
Through the back door. Did a little extra EV analysis for Ryan this week. A little favoritism. So anyway, to be brief, the message I have to bring, I think, is a really important one, and it's that this balance is really fragile, and it's something that we need to pay attention to. So the statistic I chose, which was 15%. Copper prices up year to date. that compares to just 10% for the broader index of, commodities, whether you look at Bloomberg's index or the CRB, metals, ag, oil, the whole basket. Copper's kind of in this different class because supply has been very tight over the past year related to various difficulties in bringing on new production in South America.
Okay, so bringing on new, so it's not that the industry has been disrupted by the pandemic or other events. I mean, clearly demand is up, right? Because copper goes into lots of stuff too, just like, chips and lumber. So demand is picked up. And of course, the home building industry drives a lot of demand for copper. And the supply side has just not been able to keep up with that. But it's not because of any pandemic related supply distortions. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, in part, it's the classic commodity cycle that we were talking before,
Yeah.
Periods of underinvestment followed by periods of high prices and the supply side catching up. And, in comparison to lumber or semiconductor fabs, like bringing new mines on is a multi-year process. So we have a market that, the way this plays out is, there's been new investment this year. We're going to have new investment in our big producers, which are Chile, Peru, and to some extent, producers in Africa. But it's a delicate balance. Copper prices spiked. I think you guys talked about it when Chilean miners went on strike early in August. And we're on an edge, really, where, anything that happens in South America, whether it's labor related, a lot of just political turmoil right now, sort of any false step throws us, throws a wrench in global supply chains, a huge copper wrench that we're going to have a hard time taking out.
Yeah. I mean, now I remember why I wanted you on, because embedded in what the mess that's been created by the pandemic to global supply chains, which is idiosyncratic, obviously, to the current period. This is, very unusual, obviously, but embedded in that is this kind of classic kind of cycle that exists in particularly commodity markets, agriculture and metals and even the energy markets, where what happens is demand picks up coming out of the recession. The supply side of these markets can't respond quickly enough because the mines have been turned down or turned off. The oil platforms have been fallowed. To get them back up and running takes a bit of time. And in many cases, there's been underinvestment, through the preceding recession. And the result is you get these, and then of course you have the financial accelerator that I talked about in the context of lumber, where you have people kind of speculators jumping in and speculating on price. And so all that comes together and creates this kind of classic commodity cycle. But that augurs well going forward, right? At least if you're not a producer of commodities, but a consumer of commodities, because, demand starts to moderate because of the higher prices. And because of the higher prices, the supply side of these markets kick into high gear because they can make a boatload of money. And then you see these prices come back in. And so we would expect copper prices to kind of roll over, steel prices, ag prices, energy prices, and kind of moderate as we move forward here. Is that kind of sort of roughly right?
Yeah, on the nose. The risk is, and this is the original stat that I had run by Ryan, the number's 40%. And that's the share of global copper production in South America, mostly Chile and Peru, a little bit in Brazil. And, just the pandemic has really amped up underlying political turmoil in Latin America. Countries that are rewriting their constitution, introducing new tax regimes for the mining industry. And our baseline is, not a major shift, but we just don't know. There's a populist undercurrent across the region. And, this is the reason why, I'm really concerned about copper markets moving forward. I mean, it's in our baseline, we're going to have demand and supply balance out, and like you said, moderation in prices, but there's certainly plenty of risk involved.
Okay. So you're saying, given the political instability throughout all of Latin America, and that's pretty obviously from Bolsonaro in Brazil, and pick your country, there's issues that could be disruptive to investment that's necessary for the price moderation that we expect. That may not happen, and that if it doesn't happen, it might be because of this political uncertainty.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. All right. Okay. So very informative, very useful. So let's end the conversation with a bit of a forecast, and I'll begin with you, Jesse, because we're on you. We're at $4.30 for a pound of, is it a pound? Yeah, it's a pound.
Yeah, dollars per pound.
Yeah, pound of copper.
Yeah.
I just got my units confused. And typically it's $3. That's what it is on average through the cycle. $2 is pretty low. That's kind of recessionary where we were.
Yeah, that was our pandemic low.
The shutdowns on the pandemic. Yeah. Okay, so we're at $4.30. When do we get back to $3?
Oof. In our forecast, not for some time. We actually have prices trending higher over the next 10 years, and implicit in that assumption. So not trending higher. We kind of return to.
Wait. We're at $4.30. Are we not going back to $3?
No, we don't quite get there. We hit 3.4, 3.2 in 2023, and then we start to tip back up again.
Okay. All right. Roughly speaking, we get back to 3 and when? Did
you say 2023? And the end of next year into 2023.
Okay, so that's the horizon I'm focused on here. So because obviously longer run than there's the general rate of inflation, all kinds of stuff, but we get back to roughly $3 or close to typical by mid 2023. Did you say?
Yeah, or even early in 2023. So
early 20. So 18 months from now, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, that feels right to me. Okay, good. It better be right because that's our forecast. So sounds good. All right, very good. We're working backwards here. Todd, lumber prices, that's been our poster child for all this. We were at $350, $400 a thousand board feet, got to a peak of 1,600. I think you said we're back now down to about 500, let's say, give or take, depending on the contract. When do we get back to 350, 400?
I don't think we're going to get back down there, at least not anytime soon. But that's not to say that we're going to have a huge spike up, but just demographics and home building.
No.
That's going to have to happen.
You're doing the same thing Jesse is. I don't know. No. I want to know.
I'm not explaining it enough.
Yeah. Over the next 12, 18, 24 months, are we going to be less than $500 and where's it going to be, over the next 12, 18, 24 months?
I will say, so one, it's about 600, it's a little closer to 600. I would say probably closer to 700 over the next 12 months, just because of home building demand. Because we're so critically short on new homes. As much as I know inventory has creeped up on new homes, I think it's like 6 or 7 months now, 6.8, I think. We still need more housing, and so I don't think that we're gonna see enough
even with
of a
the supply increases that are coming, because we know sawmill investment has picked up dramatically. We're going to see a lot of new sawmills. You're saying that demand is going to keep up with that, and so prices are not going down from where they are today.
Yes, because I think sawmills will idle a little bit even before.
What about other building material prices? I mean, steel, aluminum, appliances. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, well, think about what else is competing with them. I mean, everything, like chips are going to go into the appliances, so appliances aren't going to go down.
Interesting.
Steel, I mean, demand is up for everything. So I would say, unless you think we're going to see all of a sudden people stop using less steel, or start using less steel.
Well, no, steel. I mean, the level of stuff we're buying is still very elevated. It much higher than where you would have expected it to be based on pre-pandemic trends. So the answer is yes. Not on home building. Home building, that's all different ball game. But retailing in general, I mean, goods. what we retail sales, they're gonna, I don't know how they moderate. I don't think they, fall off a cliff, but they are gonna moderate. But
Right.
interesting. That's an interesting. Ryan, do you buy that? What he's saying?
No, I think they're going to moderate.
Yeah, they're
I
gonna
mean,
moderate.
particularly for other commodity prices, construction costs. If you look at the industrial production, so the output for these industries that have these high prices right now, it's increasing very, very quickly. Capacity utilization is climbing, so I think the supply response may overshoot, and that should put some downward pressure on prices.
Okay. Oh, it feels like we had a bet here. We're going to take all right, record this for history. We're going to have a bet. Ryan, what is the current lumber price, the benchmark price? Todd just said 600. Is it 500 or
590 yesterday?
590. And that's the current contract.
Yes, November contract.
Okay. Well, we'll go with that. 600. So 18 months from now, we're going to have Todd back. And what do you think the price is going to be, Todd? Quickly.
650.
650. Higher. Okay, very good. Ryan?
I'll go 500.
I'll go 400. Write that down. Write that down, baby. Jesse, you recorded that in your 10 languages? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Tim, you're up, man. No wishy-washy stuff, and the horizon, 12, 18, 24 months. We don't really have a benchmark chip price, but I don't know, however you want to characterize it. What is the world going to look like in the chip industry?
Yeah, I'll say most optimistic scenario, second half of 2022 is the earliest that we see sort of, easing of the shortage for certain types of chips. And what that means is basically lead times coming down from 26 weeks and over to something more like 10 weeks, which it has been in the past. But again, I think we've spoken at length about sort of general trends, right, in terms of more and more appliances, as Todd mentioned, using chips, more and more electronic gadgets. Everything's becoming digitized, right? And as you said, Mark, at the top of the hour, right? I mean, it's digitization, right? I mean, this is kind of the way the world works now, right? I mean, so I don't really think demand is going to fall at all. It's going to be a question of whether supply can meet that demand and whether sort of demand can make adjustments, right? Along the lines of what we mentioned earlier in terms of inventory management, in terms of making supply chains leaner, right, more efficient.
Yeah.
But those things take time, so it's just
yeah.
And that forecast is my most optimistic forecast. That's assuming no further Delta spikes, no geopolitical tensions that would,
Tim, we're running along in the tooth here. I know.
All right.
Give me your baseline. What do you think? Not your most optimistic.
Yeah, I would say baseline. If I was playing it safe, I would say 2023.
2023. Okay.
Yep.
Fair enough. Okay. Very good. This is a fantastic conversation. I wish I could go on with each of you. We should probably do a separate podcast. This is a long podcast, this one here, because obviously we had a lot to say and we had a lot of people on, but hopefully the listener got a lot out of it. I certainly did. I enjoyed it very much. And I'm going to put a quick end to it, but please, if you have other topics you'd like us to address, go to economy.com, Inside Economics, and give us your suggestion. We'd take that to heart. And we always appreciate any ratings that you provide to us. So thank you for all this. I guess the takeaway for me is that this normalization in global supply chains, pricing and availability and inventory and all the things that are impacted by the supply chain issues is a process, and it's going to take some time. It's not going to be tomorrow. It's not going to be next month. It's not going to even be next quarter. Obviously, it depends on the product we're talking about. Each one is running on their own dynamic and has their own story. But this could be, something that's going to play out at least over the next year, probably over the next 2 years, something like that. In the case of some things, there's no going back here. Prices are going up. That's everyone shaking their heads reasonably up and down. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Todd doesn't agree. No, you do agree. Okay. All right. Sort of, not really. Okay. Well, that's great, because we're going to have you back in 18 months from now. We're going to see who wins that bet, right, Ryan? Ryan never forgets a bet.
No, I don't.
He does not. Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to mark it down.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care now. See you next week.